travel ban. The Trump administration defends one of its immigration policies before the nation's highest court. We are there. French toast.
And reverence for the rights bestowed on us through grace and the glory of God.
We have reaction from President Trump's first state dinner. A narrow victory. A pro-life Republican holds on to a congressional seat in Arizona. What it means for the midterm. And singing her praises. A professor examines the Catholic roots of an American musical icon. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, April 25th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining me from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A divided Supreme Court may be on the verge of upholding President Donald Trump's travel ban. The president seems likely to win the case after two key justices on the high court signal their support for the controversial policy. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee was inside the court for oral arguments. He joins us with details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Anthony Kennedy both seem to lean towards keeping the executive order. The order limits travel by citizens from several mostly Muslim countries. It has sparked outrage from many Americans, and protesters turned out today to voice their concern.
Now! When do we want it? Now!
Dozens filled the sidewalk outside the Supreme Court this morning. Friends and family members of foreign nationals who cannot visit the U.S. because of the president's executive order. Zahra Bilu, with the Council on American Islamic Relations, believes the travel ban is targeting Muslims.
That America at its best is the opposite of what this president is doing. America at its best welcomes immigrants and all of their diversity of faith practices.
An accusation the administration has denied since the president signed the first version of the order in January of 2017.
It's not a Muslim ban, but we were totally prepared. It's working out very nicely.
The current version, the third draft, places various restrictions on foreign nationals from 8 countries. Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Iran remain on the list from earlier versions. Chad, Venezuela, and North Korea have been added. Last December, the Supreme Court temporarily allowed the entire ban to continue indefinitely. President Trump's lawyer told the justices the countries on the list are not based on religion, but on risk to national security, and the president has broad powers well within the Constitution. But lawyers representing the state of Hawaii, which is challenging the ban, disagree. They cite U.S. immigration law.
There shall be no nationality-based discrimination. There shall be no nationality-based discrimination. That's what the president's order does.
Catholics also joined in the protest today.
We stand with all people of faith and all people of goodwill who want to come to America and really live out its values.
Now, Catholic bishops have also voiced concern over the president's travel ban. They say they're worried about vulnerable populations who will not be allowed to seek protection and may be fleeing places because of religious persecution and due to unaccompanied children. Lauren?
Wyatt, we hear so much about how the court is divided ideologically. Did you get a sense of that when you were in the courtroom?
I did, Lauren. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, for example, appeared to challenge the ban with their questions. And Justice Sotomayor, I noticed, was probably the most aggressive, I would say, with the U.S. Solicitor General, who's the one who's defending President Trump's policy. Now, on the other end, though, conservatives have also been pretty aggressive in some parts, especially Samuel Alito, I would say, who had some tough questions for the lawyer who was challenging the ban as well. But we don't expect a ruling right now. We'll expect one likely not until the end of June. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the Supreme Court. Thank you, Wyatt. Today, the White House says the travel ban is needed for safety and security and is defending another immigration policy. After a setback, a federal judge ruled the Trump administration must resume a program shielding hundreds of thousands of young immigrants from deportation. White House correspondent Mark Irons joins us. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Those immigrants are known as Dreamers, and that program is called DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Catholic bishops are urging Congress and the president to help them. Now a judge is forcing the administration to reopen DACA. Today, the White House is standing by its decision to shut it down. How's the president reacting to the federal judge who says the administration needs to reopen DACA?
Look, we've been very clear. We think it's an illegal program, but that's something that the Department of Justice is going to have to handle.
DACA was enacted by the Obama administration. Recipients are referred to as dreamers, undocumented immigrants who were brought here as minors and are given special protection to live and work in the U.S. Today, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops released a statement in support of the USA Act, a piece of legislation bishops say would provide dreamers with protection from deportation as well as a path to citizenship and, at the same time, increase border security. In the statement, Bishop Joe Vasquez, chairman of the USCCB's Committee on Migration, says, "Every day my brother bishops and I witness directly the constant anxiety of dreamer youth and their families, and that experience of urgency moves us to press Congress for an immediate and durable solution to this problem." As lawmakers try and come up with a solution, the federal judge who ruled against the Trump administration now says the Department of Homeland Security has 90 days to better explain why DACA is unlawful. If the department cannot come up with a good explanation, the judge says it must accept and process new as well as renewal DACA applications. Lauren?
Is the White House still counting on Congress to come up with this long-term solution?
Well, as soon as President Trump canceled DACA, he shifted responsibility to lawmakers, but so far they have not passed a new immigration bill. We tried to ask White House Legislative Director Mark Short about this topic today, but he would not respond to our questions. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. 120 guests, including 8 of the world's wealthiest and a Vatican representative, attended last night's first state dinner at the White House. President Trump toasted France's President Emmanuel Macron, highlighting similarities.
Respect for life, love for our neighbors, pride in our traditions, defense of our heritage, and reverence for the rights bestowed on us through grace and the glory of God.
The menu included rack of spring lamb, jambalaya, and for dessert, ice cream. 100 guests included Archbishop Christophe Pierre, the Vatican's top diplomat in the United States. French President Emmanuel Macron urges the U.S. to reject fear and launch a new era of leadership and security. Macron told a joint meeting of Congress, "The American and French people have had a rendezvous with freedom." Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi was inside the House chamber. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. President Macron called for maintaining the post-World War II order based on freedom and democracy. He condemned isolationism, which is a policy of staying out of world affairs. The French leader says he's looking forward to a new era of working together, which includes its challenges.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the French Republic.
In the People's House, French President Macron plays off President Trump's signature line.
Let us work together in order to make our planet great again.
Macron says he's sure the United States will rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, the international deal to cut greenhouse gas emission. President Trump last year said he'd leave.
Let us face it. There is no planet B.
The French president says France will stay in the Iran nuclear deal, which President Trump is considering abandoning.
Iran shall never possess any nuclear weapons. Not now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, never.
The French president says he supports America's push to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. He also urged the U.S. not to retreat from its historic and military role in world affairs.
We can choose isolationism, withdrawal, and nationalism. This is an option. It can be tempting to us as a temporary remedy to our fears. But closing the door to the Word will not stop the evolution of the Word.
It's the first time since 2007 a French president addressed Congress, but not all lawmakers were impressed. Representative Thomas Massey, a Republican of Kentucky, says Macron is a socialist, militarist, globalist, alarmist, a science alarmist, and the dark future of the Democratic Party in the United States. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting on that joint meeting. Thank you, Jason. The White House is defending the president's nominee to run the Department of Veterans Affairs. Admiral Ronnie Jackson, the White House doctor, is accused of drinking on the job and unprofessional behavior. But officials say Jackson passed at least 4 background checks and call the accusations baseless. Jackson is not showing signs of withdrawing. The GOP holds on to an Arizona U.S. House seat by a narrow margin. Republican Debbie Lesko won by just 5 percentage points. It took a big money push from the Republican Party. The national pro-life group Susan B. Anthony list calls Lesko a pro-life champion who will fight wholeheartedly to protect unborn children and their mothers.
Let's play ball.
Republican lawmakers returned for the first time to a baseball field where they were ambushed by a gunman. Several people were injured last June in that attack, including House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. He has had numerous surgeries to recover. The bipartisan charity congressional baseball game has been held in June since 1909. Gunmen kill 15 people, including 2 priests, in an early morning attack on a Nigerian Catholic church. Nigerian officials say the attackers also burned down 50 houses. In a statement, the country's president calls it vile, evil, and satanic. Chilean victims of clergy sexual abuse arrive in Rome to meet with Pope Francis. Juan Carlos Cruz says he will urge the Holy Father to remove toxic bishops and cardinals who have defamed survivors around the world. Cruz also says he believes Pope Francis is, quote, a good man. And the family of terminally ill toddler Alfie Evans today loses another court case. Britain's Court of Appeals rejects their bid to move their son to a Vatican hospital. Attorneys say the family knows their son will die, but they want care in line with Catholic teaching. The toddler's life support was withdrawn earlier this week. Doctors say further treatment is futile. Today, the president of Poland tweeted his support, saying Alfie Evans must be saved. The Archbishop of Liverpool says he is praying for Alfie and his family. Archbishop Malcolm McMahon says, in part, we hold in prayer his parents, Tom and Kate, his family, and all those who care for him and accompany him on this journey. However, the church in Britain has been criticized for not providing more support. Pope Francis is celebrating a summit of leaders from North and South Korea this week. It's an opportunity to start a dialogue.
Il signor Moon Jae-in, il signor Kim Jong-un.
At his weekly audience, the Holy Father asked President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un to, quote, have the courage to be artisans of peace. They will meet Friday in the demilitarized zone, and that summit could lay the groundwork for the president's planned meeting with the North Korean dictator. Coming up, new countries are added to the list of the worst religious freedom offenders. And a Catholic nun is given 30 days to leave the Philippines. The Philippines is deporting an Australian Catholic nun for engaging in what's being called partisan political activity. This after the country's president had her detained for a night. 71-year-old Sister Patricia Fox has 30 days to leave the country. The nun has been in the Philippines for almost 30 years. She primarily works with farmers and says she hopes to meet with officials to change their minds. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom says threats against religious freedom are on the rise across the globe. In an annual report released today, the group is once again asking the State Department to add 6 countries to its list of worst offenders: Central African Republic, Nigeria, Pakistan, Vietnam, Syria, and Russia. They would join 22 other countries accused of violating their citizens' religious freedom. Joining us now is Daniel Mark, the chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, also known as USERF. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Really glad to be here.
Why is the State Department reluctant to put these 6 countries on the list?
Well, there's a different story for each one. In the case of Pakistan, one we've long advocated for, sometimes we say the worst country not on the CPC list. It's probably because we cooperate with them very closely on military matters, anti-terrorism, Afghanistan, and to instigate them further with this kind of slap across the face is probably not something they want to do.
And Syria, we've just witnessed, again, an alleged chemical attack by Bashar Assad on his own people. Russia is also on this list. Why won't they do that?
No, you're asking great questions, and there's so many different complications. In Syria, part of it is, what's actually a political conflict and what's a religious conflict, and so many variables that go into that. In the case of Russia, frankly, Russia, we recommended for the first time last year. This is only the second time because things have gotten so much worse. But Russia is an important player on the world scene, and maybe the administration, last year I said, well, it was their first go around. They want to figure out the process, but maybe they don't want another thing to fight with Russia over at this time, but we think they should.
Mexico. If we want to talk about religious freedom, we have reported here at EWTN News Nightly the 2 murders of priests in Mexico. Why isn't Mexico on this list?
Absolutely. And one thing to stress is that we can't cover every country in the world, and we try to cover the ones where the abuses are the most systemic and widespread. Now, Mexico, there are many problems, and we're watching it very carefully. At this stage, we don't see the issues in Mexico rising to the same level as some of these others. It's not in Afghanistan. It's not in Iraq. But we are keeping a careful eye on it, knowing that these problems are growing, sadly.
You say religious freedom is deteriorating around the world. Is this because people are apathetic about this issue?
Well, fortunately, I think we're at a time where people are less apathetic than ever, and that's good. At the same time,
more apathetic?
No, less
Okay,
apathetic.
all right.
I think we find ourselves at a time where there's more awareness about this issue, more interest. Now, not as much awareness and interest as we want.
As you want, of course.
But more. It's working. It's growing, the interest and the care around the world. But we're also facing worse. I mean, the barbarity of ISIS, that we dealt with over the past years is something that had never been encountered before in the world. And Russia's growing authoritarianism, China, and so on. And so it's not because people in the West don't care, but I think the challenges are getting greater.
And I know that you're calling for the administration to take action by the legislation on the International Religious Freedom Act. So best of luck to you on that. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. Daniel Mark, the chairman of the U.S. Commission on Religious Freedom.
Thank you for having us.
In the German state of Bavaria, Christian crosses will be placed at the entrance of all state buildings. The state's governor began the process by hanging a cross in his own office. Crosses are already mandatory in public schools and courtrooms in the predominantly Catholic region. Up next, the Catholic roots of a jazz legend. And playing in the sand. An American artist has an unusual gift for Pope Francis. The Holy Father is planning to focus on the fate of Christians in the Middle East on an upcoming visit. Francis will travel to the Italian port city of Bari on July 7th. He's inviting the heads of churches and Christian communities from the Middle East to join him there in a day of reflection and prayer. Billie Holiday is known as the founding mother of jazz. She made hundreds of recordings beginning in the 30s and performed innumerable times. Holiday started her career making the rounds at the speakeasy clubs during Prohibition. Lesser known is her connection to the Catholic Church. Joining me is Professor Tracy Fessenden. She's a professor of religious studies at Arizona State University and author of the new book, Religion Around Billie Holiday. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren. I want to start, if I could, by saying how grateful I am to you and to your network for taking note of Billie Holiday in the context of her Catholicism. That is so seldom done. It is a recognition, I think, that is long overdue, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
Well, it's fascinating for me, who grew up loving Billie Holiday. Now, we know her as Billie Holiday, but a young Eleanor Fagan, or Eleanor Guff, I think as she was known then, was shuttled between family members and this Catholic convent. She received her only formal musical instruction at the House of the Good Shepherd for Colored Girls in Baltimore. What influence do you believe the music of the Catholic Church played in shaping her musical style.
We often read that Billie Holiday was entirely self-taught, and while she had enormous innate talent, she did receive vocal instruction at the House of the Good Shepherd from the chaplain there, who was also the priest who baptized her. What I hear in her vocal inflections, in her phrasing, in her way of shading the notes is something that was very new to Catholic liturgical music at the beginning of the century, and that was the form of chant that had recently been revived or renewed by the monks in a monastery in Solesmes, France. What we hear, I believe, at the end of the 19th century in this newly revived Gregorian chant is something that sounds very modern, and something that sounds very much like Billie Holiday's vocal style, a kind of rhythmic freedom, a loosening of her relationship to the notes, and a quality in her voice that is very much like ordinary speech.
Her time at the House of the Good Shepherd also exposed her to the sacrament of confession. Do you find themes of redemption and forgiveness in her music?
I do. I believe that Billie Holiday developed her distinctive persona in part at the House of the Good Shepherd, where she was exposed to the lives of the great women saints in Catholic tradition, extraordinary women who often, like her, needed to navigate very punishing personal histories and needed to confront a great deal of despair and very painful circumstances. So I think she learned from those women and from the instruction she received in confession something important about compassion for all who struggle. Billie Holiday was very guided by those models, I believe, even as she herself, as we know, struggled greatly.
And part of those issues were her addiction to heroin and alcohol. But you say she should be remembered for these really poignant works. Strange Fruit in 1939 about lynching, which was something for that time, and she wrote God Bless the Child as well. So it seemed religion shaped her ability to tackle difficult topics.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. That is beautifully put. She herself did not write Strange Fruit. That was written for her by a Jewish composer named Abel Mirapol, but she certainly put her distinctive stamp on it.
Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own.
What about her signature song, God Bless the Child?
Yes, that's a song that Billie Holiday did write with the help of a composer named Arthur Herzog. And she called it, or at least the sheet music calls it, a spiritual in swing, which is a very interesting description. It's not exactly a spiritual, but it was Billie Holiday's take on the tradition of the spirituals, which was not her tradition. Because she was Catholic, she was not raised in a church where she would have heard spirituals regularly. But she, I think, put her own distinctive stamp on that tradition with the song God Bless the Child.
Thank you so much, Professor Tracy Fessenden, author of the new book, Religion Around Billie Holiday.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure.
And finally tonight, pay attention to this complicated story. An artist from New Jersey brings the Pope a bit of Argentina to the Vatican. John Gowdy creates sand sculptures. He's actually internationally renowned. He used sand from a World War I battlefield in northern Italy. He created this 400-pound replica of the Pope's former church in Buenos Aires. 10 guys had to move it there, and it couldn't crack. How can you imagine doing that? Gowdy's wife, who helped him, said that giving a gift to Francis was, quote, the closest thing to touching the sky. How beautiful is that? And what a great memento for the Pope. Unless it doesn't stay together. Do you think it would? I don't think so. All right, anyway, for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless you.